My name is Patrick Greer. For 14 years, I led the Southeastern division of Northmere Dynamics, from a cramped industrial park in Atlanta to a multi-million-dollar arm of the company. Not with flashy presentations or viral campaigns. Just consistency, loyalty, and work done right the first time. If you've ever felt discarded after years of giving your all, this story is for you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and drop a comment if this hits home. That morning, I was called into a quick strategic alignment meeting. Brandon Lowe, our new CEO, sat behind a mahogany desk he didn't earn, flanked by two silent consultants with glossy folders. "We're restructuring to maximize long-term shareholder value," he said, almost rehearsed. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I already knew. I'd watched it happen to others, people who built Northmere from the ground up, erased overnight by someone with a spreadsheet and a plan. Now it was my turn. Security walked me back to my office. A polite young man from HR named Daryl stood awkwardly by the door while I packed. A photo of my wife and son from the Smoky Mountains. The brass plaque my team had given me after we landed the Ryder Tech account. A note from Evelyn in procurement, thanking me for driving across state lines to get a faulty batch replaced before a critical install. 14 years. All of it now fit into a banker's box. As I left, no one said much. Thomas from legal avoided eye contact. The plant supervisor, Carrie, mouthed, "I'm sorry," but didn't step closer. I walked to my car. No drama. No outburst. Just silence and the sinking sense that I'd been cut from something I helped build. From the rearview mirror, I watched the Northmere Tower, once a symbol of pride, grow smaller with every mile. I thought it would feel freeing, but it didn't. It felt wrong. I started at Northmere when our Atlanta branch was just a dusty warehouse off an old rail line, barely making payroll. They were trying to break into the industrial automation market in the Southeast, but the division was hemorrhaging money and morale. I was their last shot before corporate shut it down. 9 employees, no systems, just a list of angry clients and a stack of delayed orders. So I hit the road. I drove across Georgia, the Carolinas, northern Florida, meeting every client face to face. Not with pitches, but with a legal pad and one question. What went wrong? They told me. Missed deliveries, inconsistent specs, poor calibration, radio silence after installs. So I fixed it. Slowly. One call, one visit, one promise kept at a time. By year 3, we weren't just stable, we were growing. I brought in fresh talent like Mariah, who went from admin assistant to one of our best technical reps. I hired Eric, a robotics major straight out of Auburn, after seeing how he redesigned a conveyor belt interface in a mock project. We earned our way into Ryder Tech, Oxford Steel, and eventually Braniff Logistics. We didn't undercut, we outperformed. My wife, Teresa, used to say, "You're not just building a business, you're building a reputation." She was right. She held it all down at home. Every late night, every 6 a.m. flight I took. I kept saying it was for something that would last. And for a long time, it did. 3 CEOs came and went. Each one backed our work, praised our numbers, trusted my judgment. But then came the merger. Kestrel Group bought Northmere last spring, and everything changed. Suddenly, I was sitting in rooms where no one spoke to clients, but everyone had opinions. Brandon Lowe arrived with zero background in operations, but big ideas about streamlining and margin consolidation. I should have seen it then. His team didn't ask how we hit 18% year-over-year growth. They asked why our labor costs per unit weren't lower. They saw relationships as inefficiencies. And I I became a liability. I thought loyalty mattered. Turns out, it didn't fit into their spreadsheet. The morning after, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee growing cold between my hands. Teresa moved quietly around the kitchen, giving me space, until she finally sat across from me and asked gently, "What are you thinking?" I looked out the window. The crepe myrtles had started to bloom. "They don't understand what they've done," I said softly. And surprisingly, I wasn't angry. That's what caught me off guard the most. I felt clear. I opened my personal laptop, one I hadn't touched in months, and pulled up an old contact spreadsheet I'd kept updated for years. Not the company database. My own list. Personal numbers, email addresses, birthdays, client notes. 14 years of real people, not line items. At 9:17 a.m., my phone rang. "Patrick, it's Dana from Braniff." Her voice was tight. "We just got that generic announcement about leadership changes. Please tell me you're not one of them." I hesitated. "I was let go yesterday." Silence, then a shaky exhale. "Who's managing our account now?" They didn't say. She paused, then said what I had already expected. "You were the only reason we renewed last quarter. Pricing was steep, but we stayed because we knew you'd take care of us. If something went wrong, you'd fix it." I didn't respond right away. I could hear her pen tapping in the background, a habit she had when deciding between two tough options. "Can I call you back later?" she finally asked. "Of course," I replied. I set the phone down. Teresa had stopped pretending not to listen. "You're not done," she said. "Not even close." 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Jordan from Ryder Tech. Then Marlene at Oxford Steel. Then Kevin at Crossline Robotics. Each conversation followed the same rhythm: shock, concern, frustration. They weren't just calling to vent. They were fishing for a way forward. And they all said it without saying it. "We didn't stay with Northmere. We stayed with you." By noon, I had missed 2 calls from Brandon Lowe. I didn't pick up. For the first time in 14 years, I realized something simple but powerful. Maybe I didn't need a company's name behind me. Maybe my name was enough. That afternoon, I received an email from Mariah, my former team lead at Northmere. The subject line was short: "You should see this." Attached was a PDF, internal document. Confidential. Likely something she wasn't supposed to have, let alone share. It was a restructuring presentation from 2 weeks before my termination. Slide after slide, laid out in bullet points and color-coded graphs, detailing a plan I now realized had been in motion long before my exit meeting. Page 12 stopped me cold. Phase 1. Eliminate legacy leadership to streamline cultural shift. Next to my name, a note in red. Too relationship dependent, difficult to replicate, potential roadblock to automation model. I leaned back, heart pounding, not from anger, but from recognition. This had never been about performance, not metrics, not margins. It was about control. I had built something they couldn't understand, much less duplicate. Another slide laid out post-departure adjustments. Raise rates on long-standing clients by 15% once contracts were up for renewal. Reduce customer service teams by 40%. Replace account managers with automated CRM support bots. And then I saw it. Names: Mariah, Eric, Kelsey. 3 others from my division marked non-essential, scheduled for phase-out once Greer exits. They hadn't just pushed me out. They were planning to gut the team that built the success they were now trying to extract value from. I printed the presentation and set it on the kitchen table. Teresa read it quietly, her face still. After a long pause, she said, "They're not just dismantling what you built. They're going to blame you when it all goes wrong." I nodded, jaw tight, and hope I stay quiet while they do it. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Brandon. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready. Not yet. That evening, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Daniel Sloan, CEO of Ridgemark System, smaller competitor in Tennessee. He'd reached out twice before, once in 2018, once in 2020. "I heard what happened," the message read. "Their mistake. My offer still stands, and this time, I'm willing to make it sweeter." I stared at the screen. Maybe a door had just closed, but another one had just cracked open. The next morning, I met Daniel Sloan for coffee at a quiet spot just off the highway outside Chattanooga. He looked the same. Calm, thoughtful, not trying to impress anyone. He slid a folder across the table. No dramatics. "Senior Vice President of Client Strategy," he said. "Equity stake. Full control over your client relationships. And, if you want it, room to bring your team." I didn't open the folder right away. "What makes you think I'm ready for this?" He smiled. "Because you haven't lost your clients. They're just waiting for you to decide where to lead them next." I left the meeting with the offer in my hand and a fire in my chest. Not revenge, not ego. Something deeper. The chance to build again, this time without looking over my shoulder. That afternoon, I called Mariah, then Eric, then the others. I told them the truth. About the restructuring, about their names on the cut list, about Ridgemark's offer. No sales pitch. Just a simple choice. Walk away clean now, or wait and be discarded quietly later. Every single one of them said yes before I even finished explaining. I called Daniel that evening. "We're in," I said. "But I'll need formal letters by Monday. I want this to be airtight. My people deserve clarity." "You'll have them tonight," he replied. After dinner, Teresa found me in the garage, wiping down my old fishing rods, the ones I used to take Dylan out with when he was little. She leaned on the doorway and said, "Feels different this time, doesn't it?" "It does," I answered. "Because it's mine." I didn't return Brandon's calls. Didn't reply to his emails. I didn't need to. I had already made my move. Not to destroy what they had, but to protect what we had built. And maybe, just maybe, to build something better. The next week moved fast. By Tuesday, we had all received formal offer letters from Ridgemark. Titles, benefits, relocation assistance if needed. Everything handled with professionalism Brandon's team had never managed in 18 months. One by one, my team submitted their resignations to Northmere. Eric texted. He didn't even look me in the eye, just said noted and moved on. Mariah said HR asked if she was leaving because of me. She told them no, she was leaving because of what they did to me. But what caught me off guard were the client calls. I hadn't reached out. I'd been careful. I knew the line. No solicitation, no poaching, no under-the-table deals. But the calls still came. Donna from Breniff called first. "Our renewal's coming up, Patrick," she said. "We haven't heard from anyone on your team's replacement. No contact, no plan, just silence." I didn't try to sway her. I just said, "I'm not with Northmere anymore, Dana. I'm somewhere else now, and I have a new team." She hesitated. Would it be a conflict if I asked where? "I can't offer services just yet," I replied. "But I can tell you this. If you're ever in a place where you need trust, you know where to find it." She paused. That's all I needed. Then came Oxford Steel, then Ryder Tech, then Crossline. Each conversation was the same. No pressure, no pitch. Just open hands, open history. These weren't transactional partnerships. They were built on real connection, And they weren't calling because of service specs or delivery speed. They were calling because no one else had bothered to pick up the phone. By Friday, I had a dozen missed calls and a flood of emails from Northrise accounts I hadn't spoken to in months. Some were nervous, some were angry, but nearly all ended with the same line. "If you're building something new, Patrick, we want in." And I hadn't even opened my mouth. 3 days later, Brandon showed up at my house. I was in the garage, elbow deep in grease, working on the carburetor of my old '79 Chevy. I heard the car door before I saw the Mercedes in the driveway. He stepped out in a crisp suit, sweat already forming along his collar. "Patrick, we need to talk," he said, urgency dripping from his voice. "This is getting out of hand." I wiped my hands on a rag and didn't answer right away. "The board's breathing down my neck. Clients are threatening to pull out. Your whole team left in under a week. We're spiraling." "Sounds like a tough quarter," I replied, not looking up. He tried to keep his tone even. "Look, maybe we moved too quickly with the restructuring. The board is willing to reconsider your departure. They've approved a reinstatement offer. Senior VP, new title, higher compensation, plus..." I cut him off. "What about my team?" His eyes shifted. "We could discuss limited rehiring, case by case." I stepped closer, looked him in the eye for the first time since that cold meeting in his office. It was never about the money, Brandon. It was about respect. 14 years of building something, and you ended it with a 10-minute script. He tried to respond, but I continued. "You targeted my people, called them non-essential. You raised prices on loyal clients, then acted surprised when they left." He swallowed. "That wasn't my intent. But it was your plan," I said, voice low. "I've seen the deck." His face dropped. I turned back toward the garage. "It's too late, Brandon. I've already started something new. We're not looking back." "You're joining a competitor. That violates your non-compete." "No, it doesn't," I said flatly. "Ridgemark isn't on your restricted list, and I had it reviewed thoroughly." He exhaled sharply, frustration mounting. "Then name your price. Whatever they offered, we'll match it. Just come back." I paused in the doorway. "I don't want more money. I wanted a conversation. I wanted decency. But now..." I shook my head. "Now, I want to build something you can't touch." He had no answer, and I had no more time. 2 days after turning Brandon away, I got a call from someone I never expected. Harrison Locke, Executive Vice President of Client Strategy at Redbridge Global. Redbridge wasn't just a player, they were a giant. Multinational contracts, operations on 6 continents, and a reputation for poaching top talent when companies stumbled. "Patrick," he said warmly, "we've been following things quietly. It's clear Northmere underestimated what you brought to the table." I didn't say anything. "We'd like to fly you out to New York. Executive role, head of client transformation. Name your salary." He paused before adding, "And the team you're leading now, Ridgemark. If they're valuable, we're open to discussions about acquisitions. Nothing's off the table." I won't lie. For a moment I felt the pull. Prestige, power. A private jet if I asked for it. That night, I sat on the porch with Teresa. The stars were out, and the cicadas were loud. "So," she said, "what are you thinking?" "I'd be rich," I replied. "You already are," she said softly. "Just haven't measured it that way." I looked at my phone, at Mariah's email about onboarding new clients, at Eric's prototype for a diagnostics app we never had time to build at Northmere, at the messages from our clients, real people, thanking us for showing up early, not just on time. The next morning, I called Harrison back. "I'm honored," I said, "but I'm already exactly where I need to be. He was gracious, said the door would stay open. But I already knew. It wasn't about the title or the perks. It was about the people who trusted me enough to follow when I had nothing to offer but vision. And that trust, that was priceless. 1 week later, the news broke quietly, buried in the third section of a business newsletter I'd subscribed to for years. Ridgemark Systems acquires Eastern Division of Northmere Dynamics in strategic asset transfer. No headlines, no press conference. Just a clean transaction executed with precision. Daniel had worked behind the scenes with legal and finance for months. When the board at Northmere realized their largest regional unit was collapsing, clients gone, leadership gone, they had no choice but to sell. And we were the only ones who knew how to pick up the pieces. I didn't gloat. I didn't send a single message to Brandon. Didn't need to. That Monday, I drove to the old office in Atlanta, now bearing a fresh Ridgemark logo above the front doors. The building looked the same. Same brick exterior, same pines lining the parking lot. But everything inside had changed. We'd rehired several of the team members Northmere had laid off, the ones they'd called non-essential. Some of them cried when they walked through the doors again. We brought back structure, empathy, responsiveness. And the clients? They came back too. Braniff renewed with a 3-year deal. Oxford Steel added a second facility to their contract. Even Ryder Tech, who once threatened to walk entirely, was now asking if we could expand into their Midwest operations. I walked the halls that morning, not as a visitor, not as a returning employee, but as someone who had taken the long road back on his own terms. Eric met me by the break room, holding up the new company ID badge. "It feels different this time," he said. "It is different," I replied. "This time we're building for the right reasons." And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't since the day I was let go. Pride, quiet, steady, earned. FenCan 9, 1 year to the day. But after I was let go, I found myself driving past the old Northmere office. The building stood quiet beneath the gray Atlanta sky, but the name had changed. Ridgemark Systems now glowed proudly across the entrance in brushed steel letters. I parked across the street, engine idling, unsure of why I stopped at all. Through the windows, I saw familiar faces. Eric at the whiteboard, deep in discussion. Mariah helping a new hire get settled at reception. People moving with purpose, energy humming through the halls. A few waved, not knowing I was there. And it struck me. Everything we'd built didn't end when I was pushed out. It didn't shatter. It simply shifted, evolved, found better ground to stand on. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel bitterness. What I felt was closure. When I got home, Teresa was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She glanced up. "You're quiet." I drove past the old office. She studied me for a moment. Nostalgia or closure? "Closure," I said. "Definitely closure." We ate by candlelight that night. Dylan called from Seattle to tell me his architecture firm had just landed their biggest commercial project yet. "How's the new job going, Dad?" he asked. "It's good," I said. "I'm building something that'll last." He paused. "You always said that back at Northmere." "I know," I said, smiling. "But this time, I mean it." Later that night, I stepped out onto the porch. The Georgia air was thick with spring, the scent of pine and cut grass rising from the earth. I thought about Brandon, about the board, about all the nights I spent away from home, chasing results for people who never saw the effort behind them. I thought about the sacrifices and how none of them had gone to waste. Because in the end, It wasn't the logo that mattered. It was the people who chose to walk with me, even when I had nothing left to offer but trust. And that made all the difference. 1 year and 1 month after I walked out of Northmere with a cardboard box, I arrived early to the new Ridgemark office in Atlanta. My name wasn't on the building, but something more important was the spirit we'd built together. If you've ever been forced to start over only to realize you were never starting from zero, this story is for you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment if this resonates with your journey. That morning, I reviewed our quarterly projections. 30% above target. Our client retention rate, 97%, the highest in company history. Daniel stopped by my office with a smile that said more than words. "The board approved your proposal," he said. "Employee ownership starts next quarter. Keith and Mariah will lead the rollout." I nodded. "They'll do it right." He lingered in the doorway. "You know, Patrick, when we brought you in, I thought we were just getting a solid executive and a few loyal clients. I didn't realize we were inheriting a whole philosophy." I looked at him and said simply, "Relationships over transactions. Always." After he left, I opened my desk drawer, took out the old fishing trophy from the Braniff team, the one I nearly left behind that last day. I placed it beside a new photo of our Ridgemark team at the summer retreat, arms around each other, grinning wide. That photo meant more to me than any title ever had. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a headline. I didn't need Brandon's apology. What I needed, what I'd always needed, was the chance to build something that would outlive me, not just through profit, but through people. This time, I got it right.